I'm sorry, am I there? Can you hear me, Tammy?
Yes,
Sorry.
but I forgot to hit record. So thank you to somebody who gave a shout out. Hey, did you hit record? No, honestly, the last week has been insane. The fact that we are both sitting here and we are sort of together. So thank you for the nudge. So,
We'll try
okay,
again.
let's go back to the question. My SA husband perceives setting boundaries as ultimatums. Is this common? For example, please seek assistance to support your recovery or leave.
Well, I absolutely think that's a boundary. I think it's one of the strongest boundaries you can set, right? A boundary to me would be, a more typical boundary would be to me, I expect you to be home by 6. That's what you promised. And that's my boundary. I'm going to be really upset, or I don't want you going to work at the office where you have that affair partner. You need to work out of another office. I mean, those are boundaries that we typically hear. So what I'm concerned about in this one is the difference between a boundary and a threat. So let me just say this, and I want to say this for every partner who's in this room. It's really important that you get this. You may like it, you may not, but I want you to hear it. You are welcome to threaten us with leaving. You can say, if you do this again, I'm going to leave. Or, if I see that one more time, blah, blah, blah. But here's the deal. You can leave. God bless you. We understand you need to do what you need to do for yourself, but don't threaten unless you mean it. Because the first time I do something that you don't like and you find out about it and you don't leave, you've lost all credibility. So a boundary's fine as long as you're willing to sit behind it. A threat is something that you throw at someone because you're angry or want things to change, but you won't respond if they don't follow through. So, and my other thought is, if I were a partner or a husband, I would respond strongly to that particular statement, but I would accept it and I would understand it. And I think having reasonable expectations of when someone's going to meetings and going to therapy, as I've said many times, I'll say once again, if I was in early recovery and I was married, I would put on the refrigerator what I'm doing Monday, what I'm doing Tuesday, what I'm doing Wednesday for recovery, whether it's meetings or therapy or whatever it is, one of our support groups, because I want my spouse to be reassured. I don't, by the way, to the addicts, I don't think any of us should be waiting for our spouse to ask, did you go to a meeting? Have you been to therapy? Part of our reassuring them and building trust is saying, hey, tonight I'm going to a meeting, just want you, or tomorrow, so that they are in the loop and they're not having to ask us. When they have to ask us what we've been doing, there's already an uncertainty inside of them that they don't need to be getting from us. So keep them in the loop. Anyway, that's my thought. Anything, Tammy?
Yeah, because I think the work on, getting seek assistance to support your recovery is too broad. I think it needs to be, or I would want to see, here's what I'm looking for to see you do as a support for your recovery, but tangible things. It's like you said, the schedule on the fridge. I'd like to see the schedule on the fridge with, what you're going to do each day to support your recovery. That's a practical thing. Otherwise it can be like, well, I thought about my recovery today. While I was walking, I thought about something, like, I know we addicts can like manipulate anything. Well, I am supporting my recovery because look what, so I'm as practical as you can have it be, of like, this is what I'm looking for. I'm seeking safety. I'm looking for markers. Actions speak louder than lips moving lying. So that would be my suggestion.
Great.
Okay, the next one moving. I'm going to put on in the answered. So the next one is what to do when your SA spouse objectifies people when out in public and doesn't even know it. I see it happening in front of me. Did not call him out in the moment, came home and spoke about it when he stated he didn't even remember doing it. SA has been working on objectification. Is it normal for SAs to simply remove this from their brain? Is it because I was with him when he was on versus when he's on his own? He seems to be more conscious of it when alone or not in my presence.
So, Tammy, that's probably a few questions. So why don't you pull one out of there so everyone gets a chance, and we will answer one of those. That's
well,
okay.
I think the first piece of it is like, is it common for an SA to not even be aware? I think that's a really key thing. Or, to when they say, I don't even know I was doing that, and you're lying. Well, is it?
So denial is a wonderful thing. It allows me to do things for very long periods of time that I don't even know I'm doing. And sometimes after a while, I don't even know I'm doing them. And for sex addicts, objectification if somebody's 40, they've been doing it for 25 years, unabated. So I do believe there's an automatic piece of it. But what did I want to say about that? I'm really glad that he's working on this and is aware of this. I think that's important. I don't think you have anything to do with it, whether you're with him, whether you're not with him. He's either focusing on this or he isn't. There was one more thing I wanted to say about that. Did not tell me in the moment. I also think that so we run a treatment center. One of the things that I see come up on a regular basis, this is part of the work, and you addicts who are at Seeking Integrity right now, this, is that we are teaching you guys, we teach awareness. When do I know I'm in trouble? And then there's all of this, like, what do you do? How do you handle it? But the first piece is, and a lot of people, I'll give you an example. I work with a guy who said, I don't understand why women keep coming up to me and chatting me up. I must be a really good looking guy because I can't imagine why they keep coming up to me. And we had to sit and go through everything he did in a public space. And what he told me was, and this was the story that he was making an example out of, he was at a ticket booth, like at a ballpark, and he was standing there with a bunch of people, and he started cracking all these jokes and making fun. And before you knew it, people were moving toward him and engaging with him, and some of them are women. So what he didn't see is that action of cracking jokes and being silly and cutting up or whatever it was the key to getting women to come over to him. And until he could see that, which he wasn't aware of, which we had to make him aware of, then he was able to say, oh, I get it. I need to stop that. And that will stop this issue, because he wasn't that good looking. So anyway, Tammy, you have anything for this?
Well, and I mentioned it, I don't remember on which webinar, but like doing some bookending. If you're going to go out in public, like, call your sponsor, have an accountability. What do I need to do? And then call your sponsor at the end. And just having that focus be, I'm going out. What do I need to do? What do I need to be present? It's that mindful piece of it, can help interrupt I've been doing this 25 years. So in order to do things differently, we have to do things differently.
I want to add one more thing.
Sure.
I think if you're uncomfortable, you need to tell him. So even if he isn't aware of it, you're having dinner and you see him looking out, and you probably a waitress behind you or a waiter, whatever he's into. I would say, I feel a little uncomfortable right now. I feel like, and I would do it this way, because, okay, I'll say this. My husband is often on the phone and I'm in the room, but I'm alone. So I've learned not to say, get off the phone, or that, I say, I'm feeling a little lonely right now and I kind of miss you, or could we focus on something together? I don't necessarily say the phone. I just ask for what I want. And so I think you could say, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable. You seem kind of distracted. That's all it takes. And you are not getting into anything that's like this, because you're saying how you feel. And then he gets to maybe start to wake up to this a little bit, because he's seeing how it affects you.
I love that idea. Okay, so
Thanks.
the next one is, I'm really conflicted with viewing my SA partner as simultaneously the best person and the worst person I've ever known. I've always felt he was strong in all the areas I was lacking, but learning about the magnitude of the secrecy of his addiction and realizing what he's capable of makes me uncertain whether I am able to move past it, despite the great strides he's made in recovery. What can I do to reconcile these two versions of my partner?
Well, my first question would be, and I think you'd think this too, Tammy, how long? Like, have they been at this 3 months, 6 months, a year, 3? Because those feelings, so let me just back up. What you're calling is, what you're talking about is an expression that a friend of mine named Sophia Cottle in North Carolina brought to me, which is this concept of ambivalent love. I think she's writing a book about it, which is when someone you've been with and loved, and they've loved you and you've been connected, good or bad, right or wrong, for a long time, you're going to look over and say, oh, they're fixing the fireplace. That's really great. Or, oh, they're playing with the kids, or, oh, they're doing whatever. And you will have that feeling that you've always had of, I'm appreciative, I'm grateful, and I care about them. However, you also hate them, because they've ruined your life, they've lied to you, they've manipulated, all of that stuff. So we call this ambivalent love, which can make a lot of partners feel crazy, like you're feeling, which is, how can I love him and hate him at the same time? You absolutely can have more than one feeling at a time, and they can be absolutely diametrically opposed, because sometimes I look at my dog and I say, I love my dog and I can't wait, let's cuddle. And sometimes I look at him and say, oh God, do I have to get up and walk him again? So I love and am annoyed by my so I'm giving examples here, but Tammy, do you have a thought about this?
Yeah, and I think the time factor is really key here. I think the more time that goes by, and the more work you see him doing, your essay doing, the more those pieces come together. And it's never going to be like, oh, he or she can never hurt me ever again. Like we're in this together always, because you know that there has been betrayal. You know that that person can do that. But I think Dr. Rob does a great job in Prodependence talking about just loving a broken person. And so it isn't that black and white, because otherwise you would have bolted at the first sign of all of this, because you
Mhm.
are able to step in and see those great things. And and then there's this really, really dark piece, but it's a piece. It's not like, they're a monster.
Oh, mhm.
So okay, next question. Gay, married, 90 days past discovery, 8 weeks from full disclosure. I'm the betrayer. How worried should I be about my so-so memory?
Oh, well, that wasn't all of the information, personal information, I wasn't sure related to the end part, but let me just say one thing. One of the most important books for me to write, because I am a gay man, is a book called Cruise Control: Understanding Sex Addiction in Gay Men. And in general, if you're a gay man, it's very hard. It's like being an alcoholic in a bar. There are different sexual mores, it's a different sexual culture, and it's hard to determine, well, is my behavior okay or not? And so that's one of the things I wanted to write about, is what is normative in that community versus when you have a problem. So if you hadn't read Cruise Control, buy it. I'll make 12 cents. The publisher makes the rest, but it'll probably be helpful, really helpful for you. The other piece, just the last piece, and I'm not sure, Tammy, hold on, let me look at the last sentence. How should I, oh, memory. So I'm not sure what you mean by memory, but I can only speak to what I know about addicts, is that, well, let me try it this way. A lot of times when I'm working with a couple, a spouse will want disclosure, which is all the information about what's happened during the period of time that they were with them that they didn't know about. And this is a process we often go through with couples that it's appropriate for. However, we don't do it on day one. We do it 6 or 8 weeks in. And from the addicts, or at least I do. And from the addict's perspective, the reason I take so much time is that we don't remember stuff. We have been through so many people and so many places and done so many things over the years that we just don't remember. And so part of working, I think, with a good therapist around regaining your memory, if you will, is doing timelines. And heck, I have to say, I'll push another book. In the workbook I wrote on Sex Addiction 101, there's a whole timeline in there about where you can start to look at, where was I working? Where did I live? Was I in school? Oh yeah, what was my sex life like? And adding all of that up so you can really see it over time. And I'll push something else. We have a course where they work on stuff like this, and you can sign up for it. But listen, I'm not here to sell you anything. I simply want to say that I think it's very typical for us to not remember. And I think there are parts, it's something that needs some kind of structure, whether it's working with other people or working in some kind of book, or it's not necessarily just going to occur to you. But boy, when we start looking at it, let me say one more thing about that. We have a client that I've been working with recently, and he said things to me like, well, I had a lot of sex with women, or whatever he did. And part of treatment is to say, well, how much, how many? And when we had to add up the numbers, how many this year, how many that year, how many, until we were able to get to a number. And then we had to ask, how much have you spent? And we had to sit down again and add up the time and add up the numbers. So when we are acting out, we are deliberately leaving reality. And so to look back and say, what parts do I remember, is often difficult without a real path.
Well, and here's a couple things that I noticed in here. It says 90 days past discovery. I don't hear, what you're doing. Like, has the
Right.
behavior stopped? That would be really, really important, because if you're still going off to those behaviors, you're still going to be able to just compartmentalize and, keep everything. It will be challenging to be able to do the so-so memory. Working with a qualified professional. I'm glad you're here. how many, of the men's drop-in groups are you going to? I agree with the Sex and Porn Addiction 101 work group. Next one starts June 2nd. Call me if you, or email me if you need information on that. Well, it's on seekingintegrity.com. I'll just do that. But it's a great group, and it really gets to those foundations. I was talking to somebody today, and their person had been working with a therapist a long time, and they didn't have a 3-circle plan. There's no plan. If
Well,
there's no plan, it's
I
a
mean,
problem.
the goal of the educational piece is to fill in the blanks for what you don't do in 50 minutes of therapy. Because I noticed in so many clients that they worked on the emotional issues, they had boundaries, this and that, but they didn't understand addiction, relapse, grief, trauma, and so when you go into treatment, like a treatment center or even an intensive workshop, you're going to get a couple hours of education every day, but you don't get that if you just go to therapy. And so that's the piece. I'm not selling it to you guys, I promise, but that's the piece we created online, is so that people in therapy could get the educational part. And that's what
Yes.
Tammy's talking about.
Yes. And it's so helpful. I mean, it's one of those things where, if you're going to do this recovery journey, you get the tools to do it right. And, it makes all the difference. Floundering around, I hear from people all the time that have been floundering around for a couple of years. And I'm like, it's torture for both of you. And it doesn't have to be. I'm saying there's resources to do things differently that support each of you and both of you. So. Okay,
And I really appreciate when gay men are dealing with this issue, because I remember a time, just to say it, before marriage and all that, when it was like, oh, you do what you want and you do it, and people would get hurt all the time. So hearing people, I'm not particularly conservative in that way, but to hear two men value the connection they have and not want it to be interfered with on any level by other people, I think that's a strength, and I admire that goal for the two of you.
So the next question, hi, do you view porn or anime porn, erotic literature usage, flirting with married men and having emotional affairs with married men as love addiction or something else? I always thought love addiction was seeking love from someone at all costs to fill an insatiable need for love due to childhood neglect.
Well, you got the love addiction part right. That is one of the most succinct. I'd like to write that one down and put it on Twitter. Like, this is what love addiction is. You had that absolutely right. But the porn, the anime porn, the erotic literature, that has nothing to do with flirting or wanting to chat someone up to connect or hoping you might, or chasing the wrong people. That's a solo activity. And so, there is a reason why the meetings called Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous are called Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, because many of us have both problems. And when I read this, I don't hear just a love addict. I hear somebody who really needs to look at the balance of both of them. Let me say, Tammy, and I haven't said this in a while, that, a lot of times when I at least initially meet someone for treatment, or if I do one of the consultations here online, they want help with their porn problem. They want help with their sex workers that they're seeing. They want help with the affair. But what they don't see is that their entire sex life is a problem. It's like, well, I'm having the affair, and that's what my wife is angry about. I got to deal with the affair. It's like, but you're looking at porn 3 hours a night, 4 times a week. Like, that is the same problem in another arena. So while I respect what you're saying, and I respect that you're looking at love addiction, I think that both issues are present from what you ask. And if it were me, I'd be looking at Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous as a place to get support. Yeah, that's my thought about that.
So the next question, as the wife of an SA, I sometimes feel discouraged about my SA ever feeling comfortable with intimacy. It often sounds like it will never be his first choice. It will always be forced. Is this the future I need to prepare for? That's a heartfelt question.
Well, you get those all the time, Tammy. Why don't you start, and I'll be glad to follow up on that.
Well, I was thinking, because you've shared before how it isn't necessarily the first choice, but it's one of those things when, it's so awkward. Like, if we're always looking to be detached and, keep people pushed away, and it's hard. It is difficult to overcome, but can people learn differently? Can people, start having the experience of, oh, when I am more vulnerable, when I am more real, this is how, how we are able to interact, and that's a positive. So we can learn to do different, but I think a lot of it is, we always want to return to, to some form of comfortable.
Easy.
So yeah, exactly. It goes, but so to me, it's going to be a challenge, but I struggle. I had to learn in recovery, always and nevers and forevers were problematic for me because I get caught in all of those things. So for today, here's how things are. And I can have hope for tomorrow. I can realize that today is better than, a few days ago or whatever. But being in the, do I have to plan on it always being this way forever? That would be challenging for me to enter that space.
Thank you. I agree with all you said, and I want to add a few things.
Please.
One is I think we need to talk about what is intimacy. A lot of people think it means sex, and intimacy doesn't mean sex. At this core of intimacy is opening up to someone else and letting them see your vulnerabilities, inviting them in emotionally in a way where you could get hurt, you could get let down, they could disappoint you, but I mean, they could be disappointed by what you have to say, but they're willing to open up to you. I think about lack of intimacy in a relationship, and I don't think about sex. What my head immediately went to is what our colleague and friend Dr. Stan Tatkin says, which I think he said in our podcast, by the way,
He did.
that many trauma survivors and addicts, they want to be with their partners. They want to be in proximity to their partners, but they don't actually want to engage their partners. They just kind of want to know that they're there, And so this idea that I just want you around, and I nice to see you, I'm going here, I'm going there, isn't intimate, but it does give at least the addict the feeling that I am connecting this person, they're around, So what is intimacy? Let me give you a good example. One of my favorite examples. I think I said this to guys at the treatment center the other day. So I went to the doctor about 2 or 3 months ago. I had an elbow issue, and I was at the elbow doctor, and he asked me what I did for a living. And I said, well, I have a PhD in sex. I'm a sexologist, addiction therapist. And he looked up at me and he said, would you mind if I ask a question? And, I don't mind answering a question or two. I don't think people are intruding my boundaries if they have a question. So sure. And he looked at me, he said, I'm almost 60 and my wife is in her early 40s and I'm worried, like, will I be able to satisfy, like, what do I need to think about? Should I think about testosterone, this and that? And what I felt, forget what I thought, was what a wonderful man. Here he is taking a moment with someone he doesn't even know that well, but he's kind of trusting that I'm a doctor. He's a doctor. Open himself up and make himself vulnerable about something he was frightened about and worried about, but he thought I might have the answer. And that's my example of intimacy. I'm never going to see him again. Well, I will if I have an elbow problem, but he's not my friend. He's not my lover. He's not my partner or my husband or wife, but I felt the connection with him more than I feel with most folks because he was willing to open up in that way. Now, I wouldn't want everyone to walk up on the street and say, oh, I saw you on TV, Dr. Weiss, and would you please answer a question about sex? That might not, this is what this is for. But in that moment, I felt a very heartfelt desire and trust that he was willing to open up to me. And by the way, I could have shamed him, or I could have cut him off and said, I don't talk about work. What I did was just say, hey, I relate, I'm near your age, and let's talk about, that for a minute. And it was 2 minutes and we were done. So I just want to say intimacy, and okay, one more thing. Sex is one of the highest forms of intimacy. It's when you're physically letting someone into or putting your body into theirs. I mean, what could be more intimate than that? And if there isn't a foundation of opening up and connecting that has preceded the sex, then the sex isn't intimate. Sex, I think, is a byproduct in a long-term relationship, not for us addicts. We can have sex with anyone we see, but in a long-term relationship, sex is the byproduct of meaningful intimacy. And that's often why us sex addicts don't have sex with you guys, is we have no idea how to be intimate. We don't know how to connect. We're afraid of it on some level. And we're so used to a blur of people and images that you are much scarier. You could hurt us. You could let us down. You could make us feel less than. But that person on the street, I'm not intimate with them. That affair partner, I'm not intimate with them. The porn, so none of that can hurt me or let me down. But if I open up to you, my partner, that's the scariest part, because then I might really be up a creek or reminded of things I grew up with. That's it.
Oh, that's good. It's settling. So, okay. Hi, Dr. Rob. I am a sex addict. My wife is the betrayed partner suffering from my years of acting out in many ways. She has found her voice and has been sharing her anger now for about 2 years. We talk a lot. we talk a lot, sometimes 4 to 8 hours in a day, which includes mostly her expressing her anger. I do feel huge amounts of shame from the constant exposure to her anger. Do I have the right at some point to say enough is enough, or can we find a level that is constructive for both of us?
Well, this is a tricky question for me and Tammy to answer because we don't know where you are in your recovery. So, and again, 12 cents to me. I wrote a book called Out of the Doghouse, a relationship saving guide for men caught cheating. If you haven't read it, I suggest, meaning that sometimes we sit around expecting our partner to change, but we haven't done very much, and this isn't you necessarily. I'm just saying, if you're still occasionally looking at something you shouldn't be looking at, I'm not talking about someone on the street, I'm talking about porn, or if you're still connecting to people, in other words, if you're constantly slipping, or they don't see a clear plan of recovery, or they don't see you having really done things to make big changes in your life, then they're going to stay angry. And, uh, and so, it's our job to regain trust by doing and acting ways that are trustworthy. No cheating, no lying, having integrity, saying what I mean, meaning what I say, and not lying. But if all those things are in place and you really are doing the best you can, and let me add one more thing and you've done disclosure and all that. Let me add one more thing, that you're being very open and honest on a regular basis about what's going on with you, then it isn't as much on you. I am very concerned about any couple who spends more than at 2 years out, any couple that spends more than 20 minutes sitting down in the evening and talking about this. The idea of talking about this every single day for 2 to 4 hours would be a nightmare for me, and I think is a horrible thing for any couple to do. Why would you want 2 years in to be spending 2 to 3 hours talking about all the stuff that you're miserable about? How about this? You set a timer, and for 2 hours you talk about all the good stuff, and the last 10 minutes you talk about the bad stuff. So that's provided your behavior is not continuing. So if you're in that good place, you're really being honest, you're working on this, you've been honest with them, all the stuff is good at your end. And I'm saying this to your spouses, so you don't get mad at me, okay? I'm saying if we are really doing our job, your anger, the intensity of your anger should begin to die down at 9 months to a year. By 14 to 18 months, we're in a good place with each other. If that isn't happening, then there's some work that needs to be done by the couple, whether that's going to some kind of therapy, or it could be a little reality check for your partner, depending on where you are. Because I have talked to a friend about this, a colleague, and we kind of agree that, once it passes the year mark or so, and you're really doing your best, really, 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 then their anger becomes counterproductive. Then you're becoming the best person you can be, and they're still pushing you into you, but you're horrible and you're bad. And we're not. It's been a year or more that we've been working on this and working on ourselves, and we're not that person in the same way who was doing all that to them. So today, a year and a half later, we're not really deserving of the anger from a year and a half ago. So partners at a certain point are undermining the process for themselves in terms of healing the relationship if we're doing all the right stuff and they're continuing their anger. And I have heard addicts say and follow through on, if this anger continues and I'm continuing to gain my own self-esteem and self-worth, I'm not going to be able to stay here, because my recovery and my feeling good about myself is going to become more important than our relationship. If 50% of our relationship is you're yelling at me. So now I'm not talking about 3 months in, I'm talking about over a year. I'm talking about someone who's really doing their work, but you spouses, you have your issues too. We all do. And sometimes letting go of us as the problem can be difficult. And I get your hurt and your fear and your remorse and all of that, but anger has its purpose and its value, and it also needs to dissipate over time, or there's really going to be a problem. Tammy, I don't.
I have lots of thoughts on this one, because I do, because I'm like, I do wonder about the quality of the recovery. That's the first place I go to, because I do think that the anger dissipates for most people, not 100%. So I'm really, I'd be curious to know how. I mean, so it's been 2 years, but does that mean you've been in recovery for 2 years? You've got a solid plan. Like, there's transparency about what your 3-circle plan is, your relapse prevention plan. Like, you've done, if there's no slips, there's whatever. I mean, if you're doing really well, then yes. And I've sent the video to a few people, the carp Karpman drama triangle. And I feel like this couple's on that triangle, and it's, a power. It's like yeah, I mean, there's the victim and there's the perpetrator, and I mean, there's all these things, and you can keep doing that dance like forever. But I also was thinking the 48 hours, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't have time in my day to do that, nor would I want to be traumatized over and over and over and over again. So yeah, I mean, I like what Dr. Rob was talking about. It's like, spend 2 hours talking about, here's the progress we're making. Here's what having a contained space. And we've talked about it on a bunch of these different webinars, or having 20 minutes, twice a week. And we're going to talk about issues with our, relationship. And hopefully some of it is like, I'm seeing good things here. Here's some things, or you said something the other day, whatever, but it's more keeping current, not rehashing, you did that, 4 years ago, and, and then keep talking about it over and over again. So I do, wonder, like, the level of trauma for the partner, because if it's constantly, I mean, I hear that there was betrayal, suffering from my years of acting out in many ways. So getting qualified professional support for the trauma, would hopefully help in a different way. But I still am curious about the level of recovery.
What is she seeing? What is she seeing?
Yeah. It's
Mhm.
not what not what you're saying. I'm sorry. It doesn't cut it. What is she really seeing, that would be different? So.
And I want to say something more about couples fighting, because I know this from just regular old therapy, and I think it's really an important lesson to learn. I know in my own marriage, it's been important. When I get angry at someone, I want to bring up everything they've ever done wrong. It's like, you didn't take out the laundry, and that's like the time you did this. And it reminds me of that. And that's really destructive to relationships. It's not fair to bring up every single thing that's ever happened in the past because you're angry at someone in the present. If it's very relevant, well, this happened last week and now it's happening this week, different. But to bring up stuff that happened 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 7 years ago, and especially things related to the addiction, if there's nothing going on to, it's kind of like, well, you forgot our anniversary and that really hurt me. But, think of all the times you weren't there for me, and every day, and turning that into a rant about something that happened before I got in recovery, it's just not productive. Pick your issues, make sure they're here and now, and don't bring the past into it unless you want to talk about the past. And that's a whole different conversation. So,
And get qualified support. I mean, there are
yes.
professionals that can help guide this process. Next question. Go ahead. Oh,
Well, I
you
was
were
just
going
going
to
to
say
say, you spouses need therapy. Absolutely, no question. But the whole codependency concept that you need therapy because there's something wrong with you is completely incorrect. That's why I wrote Codependence. You need therapy because we've hurt you, because we've devastated you, because your life has been turned upside down, or at least a support group. You need a place to go where you can understand that you didn't do anything wrong and you didn't cause any of this to happen. And yes, you're in grief. And yes, you blame yourselves, all to normalize and help you understand and grow past your pain, your hurt, and your sense of violation. That's why you need to be in therapy or get counseling or support, not because we're in any way interested in what's wrong with you, but more you're beginning to get out of all that pain and hurt and find your own way.
So the next question, my spouse was in an SI a few months ago. He seems to say and do all the right things, with the exception of totally ridding his friend groups he sees occasionally. Why does things such as coming home 1 hour late cause my emotions to go up and down?
Well, there's two questions in there. Let me answer the second one, and maybe you can answer the first one. Is that okay, Tammy?
Sure.
So I want to answer the question of why do such things as his coming home an hour late cause my emotions to go up and down? I wrote extensively about this in Out of the Doghouse. If I trust my spouse and they come home late, I believe them. They were at the grocery store. They were working late. They had a lot going on. Of course, if I trust my spouse implicitly, I never think about why they didn't come home, until later or whatever. I just believe whatever they say. But if you've had an experience where you've been lied to about where this person was or when they were there, then you're naturally going to go right to, when they're an hour late, are we going through this again? And I think it is part of your spouse's recovery. And I would say this to him or her if they were here, that they need to be accountable to the commitments they make to you. So I can be late, but I need to call you. I might, even if I'm early recovery and I'm in the grocery store, I might need to take a picture of the grocery aisle just to show you, but not because not because I'm being hounded by you, but because we're not going to rebuild trust unless I'm saying the things I'm going to do and doing the things I'm going to say. I can't tell you how many times addicts have been in his very situation, or his, if he's been through our program. And I said, well, why didn't you just call them and tell them you were going to be late? Well, they might have been angry at me and I didn't want to get in with them. But don't you see what you've done? You've set them up to not trust you again. So what I'm just saying is your experience in question 2 is so normal. And I think it's something your spouse needs to work on, his awareness of how you can be triggered understandably by things that he's just, oh, well, I was just late. That needs to be addressed. And you can tell him I said so. Tammy?
Well, and he did write about that specifically in Out of the Doghouse. So if he read it before, you might need to pull that book back out again. The friend groups, I think that's interesting because he sees them occasionally. But my sense from what you're sharing is that these are friends that are problematic friends. These are not like recovery friends. So if you're feeling unsafe with that, then you having the conversation with him, why do his adventures with these friends that you don't feel safe about get to trump your safety? Because that's what I really hear is, they're my friends. I've had them for a long time. I'm reading all this into it, and so I'm going to go do what I want to do, even though this is going to make you feel unsafe and unhappy. And then apparently maybe even comes home an hour late, it popped in my head a minute ago, when you lay down with the dogs, you're going to get fleas. And so like that whole, it's an old AA expression, but I was like, I think it's one of those things where, I suspect that you've got some fear that if he's hanging out with the wrong crowd, so to speak, that he may be tempted to do things, even though he's doing the right things in recovery, like there's a whole bunch of things that, I still don't do, it's just, it isn't even that I'm worried about relapsing or something. I just don't need the mental energy to do that. So if he wants to see those friends, can they come over to your backyard and grill? I mean, is there I don't know. Is there some way that can be safe that you would feel comfortable? But otherwise, it seems fair that he was only with us a few months ago. That's very early in recovery. Even though we do a great job with our program, that's still really early in recovery. So I share your concern, and I think it's fair for you to have a conversation about, those things. And you can always play the recording of this for them. So
I want to add one thing to that.
sure.
This is a boundary. We were talking about boundaries before. I need you to be home by 6 or call me. I'm really uncomfortable with you going to that groups, and at least for a few months or whatever it is, I really would appreciate it. Unless I can look at the chat logs, which would make so I think those are boundaries, and they're very appropriate boundaries in the first year if his goal is to reestablish trust. Because in a way, he kind of has to say, what's more important to me than hanging out with these people, good, bad, right, or wrong, is that you begin to feel like you're important, you're more important, you're more special. What you need matters rather than, but I want to do this. And, even though it makes you uncomfortable, you should get used to it. Or how about this? I'm not doing anything wrong there. And maybe he's not, maybe it's the best thing in his life. But if he wants you to trust him, and if he wants you to trust him, and he wants you to feel safe with him, then he's going to put some of his interests and needs aside, at least for a period of time, to show you that his goal is to connect with you rather than to just keep doing what he wants to do.
I think that's true. Okay, the next question. I have read sex addiction is not about sex. So do sex addicts enjoy sexually acting out with prostitutes or at massage parlors?
Oh, well, that wasn't really what I meant by sex addiction isn't about sex. What I meant is that if you think about, or as we look at in treatment, when I work with addicts, the amount of time that they spend thinking about it and planning it and what do they want to do and who do they want to do with, and then there's the calling or the setting up or the making the time to do it or taking the money or whatever it is. When you look at the whole amount of time that someone spends preparing for this or getting ready for this, even if they're not aware that they've been doing that, the sex is usually 5 minutes. But they could have been in the whole process of planning and thinking about and all that for a week. They enter the desire to act out, not because they want to have sex, but because they want to escape what they're feeling. I don't drink as an alcoholic because I want to be social. That's what healthy people drink for. I drink because I don't like how I'm feeling and I want to escape. So, hey, Tammy, do you want to touch on this? Because I think you probably
No,
do.
I think that was, all forms of addiction aren't really about, it isn't about
Right.
that. I say this all the time. The acting out is a symptom. We're looking at the underlying issue. So whatever form it takes, and it could be smoking, vaping, alcohol, chemicals. I mean, it could be gaming, gambling, sex addiction, porn, whatever it is, any form of numbing out escape that completely takes you offline and is causing problems in your life. I mean, everybody, Dr. Rob has talked about like Netflix. Sure, go watch a TV program, but if you're watching Netflix for 8 hours a day and you have no life around that, then it's probably a problem. And there isn't Netflix anonymous, so it's just, what are you doing that is taking you away from being connected in a meaningful way with other people and with your life? So.
And by the way, just let me add to that. If he's working good recovery, he's going to 12-step meetings. He's got dozens or hundreds of people. He's going to some of our support groups, which are free. He has, or the alumni group, if you went through our program. I mean, there's lots of ways to hang out with people and connect. You don't have to hang out with what we would have called in the past lower companions. So,
that was to
yeah.
the question before that, right?
Oh,
'Cause
I'm sorry. Did I lose
yeah.
track?
We were talking about sex addiction. So do people have fun when they go to,
All
or do
right,
they enjoy
sorry. I'm
prostitutes?
really getting
Yeah,
old, Tammy.
yeah.
I forgot all about. So is the sex fun? Yeah. Is the goal of having the sex? No, that's the carrot. The sex is going to be great is the carrot. It's like the gambler saying, oh, winning is going to be great, but they're not looking at the whole process of getting to that table and sitting at that table and losing their money. This is called a process addiction. And the reason we call that is because the person is addicted to the whole process of getting into it and thinking about it and getting ready for it and actually doing it. They're not simply in their addiction when they're doing it. They're spaced out and dissociated and emotionally high long before they ever get to the actual act.
Okay. When the essay is a mother enmeshment and they talk to their mother, generally days afterwards, they have a bad relationship with their spouse. That could be true. I don't know. Some of them talk to their mother every single day, so that would mean forever.
And
So
some of
does
them
a
have bad days with their spouse, no matter whether they talk to their mother or not.
right.
So
So
there's things being put together. Here's the
yeah,
question. Go ahead.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
So no, well, I interrupted it too. So does the same thing happen when the essay is divorced? Do they have bad days with their girlfriend after talking to their spouse?
Well, I don't think there's anything universal here. I mean, I think I think what you're talking about is some kind of psychological thing related to women. And, I think that's about the individual. It may well be that any kind of intense connection with a meaningful woman in his life is going to stir him up in ways that leave him feeling angry and defensive. And all male sex addicts have problems with intimacy. So, and conflict for that matter. So, but I don't know that those two things necessarily be conflated, put together. So I might think about some, anyway, and I also like to understand the source of this question, like what's underneath this question. Tammy, do you have a thought about that?
No, I don't. But I was just thinking, man, I would not want to let my ex ruin, like, my ex would be so happy if he knew he could wreck days of my life. So like, there's no way I would let him have that much power over me. So for someone to fall in this cycle or even use it as an excuse, it's like to lose days of your life every time, there's a conversation would seem sad to me. So to me, I think that there's a way more going on, and there's no simplistic answer to that's a complicated question.
So this person chatted a little bit more, and I have to respond to that because I'm actually a little bit amused in a really good way. They said something like, let me see if I can find the chat. They said, oh, he's going on vacation with a girlfriend and I want to ruin their vacation. So I think this
Ah,
couple is divorced. Is that correct?
yes, it sounds like it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I want to say to you as a spouse is I completely understand. I can't completely understand. I don't know what it would be like to have someone walk out the door and go after someone else. I don't know what that's like. And I have a lot of compassion for the abandonment and hurt that would bring up for you. Absolutely. And when I want to act out like ruin something for someone else, part of the principle that I think I now live by, and I would say Tammy does too, is that hurts me more than it probably hurts them. It may feel good in the moment, but I have to live with myself. And do I want to be someone who acts out my resentments and hurts other people deliberately because I'm feeling hurt? I don't, I mean, it's up to you. If that is you and that's your goal and who you are, you just don't care, by all means, ruin their vacation. But I think when we act out our resentments, we ultimately end up regretting it on a bunch of levels. And I would think that in this case in particular, coming to peace for yourself with the fact that you're no longer married and this person, and you didn't, for whatever reasons, continue to work it out. No, not your fault, not theirs. And the fact that they're now with someone else and you may not be, I think that's something you have to come to terms with no judgment, no shame. You did it wrong. She's better. I'm younger. She's older, whatever. But just come to terms with the loss of your marriage, because a lot of times I hear spouses who have, are not in your situation, who are part of their comfort, part of what keeps them feeling okay about themselves and not, how do I say this? Anger is a defense. In therapy, we say anger is a defense. And what is the defense for? Usually sadness and fear. So imagine if you put all of that anger in away and just had to sit with the loss of your marriage. It's easier to be angry at him and her than it is to sit with your losses. That's how we are. So this is why people are so retaliatory. This is why we have wars, because everyone wants to react to their pain rather than trying to sit and figure out how they can work through it. It's human to want to lash out, but it's also human to have an intellect. So let me say this. I'm really glad you asked this question. I'm really glad you texted or wrote in a chat, because ultimately, how do you want to live with yourself? You're not with him anymore. So, and I bet Tammy, this really resonates for Tammy because we come from the same principles.
Yeah. I wouldn't want to, I don't want to be that person, I have enough. And I learned early in recovery that if I have a resentment, I'm letting someone live rent free in my head. And, I've had to work really hard at that, and I mean, on some level, I learned a lot of lessons. I'm happily and for decades remarried, but I learned a lot of valuable lessons, with my ex. I'm so eternally grateful that he's with somebody else now and I don't have to deal with him, but I learned about myself. I learned so much. I am resilient. I mean, I learned a bunch of good things about myself. And I also learned that I didn't want, I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be seething with anger. I just don't need that. So Dr. Rob mentioned Sophia Caudle earlier in this, and she does grief groups on intherooms.com. Dr. Rob does a Friday night. Yeah, Dr. Sophia Caudle. Yes. Oh, so Dr. Rob does a group on Friday nights on that. Dr. David does a Tuesday night chemsex group, but Dr. Sophia Caudle does several grief groups on In the Rooms. They're free. And being with other people, grief is we don't want to do it, but it's there whether we want to deal with it or not. And
right.
To be free of it, it's such a burden that you are saddled with, not that you asked for it, but this is what you've been handed. And so I would invite you to look for how can you get rid of that in a meaningful way. And I bet you have a lot of amazing skills and talents and things that you could give to other people,
right.
And connecting with them in a meaningful way. When I'm grateful, I can't be resentful. And so is there something that you can do for you that will make you feel good about you and not just about wrecking their vacation? It's hard. I get it. I really do. So
I want to add one more thing though, because I think there can be confusion here. Letting go of your anger, getting in touch with your grief. What do we do wrong? What's wrong with me? Why am I not enough? Whatever all of that is underneath the anger. It doesn't mean you have to forgive him. It does not mean you have to forgive him. I'm not saying that healing your grief has anything to do with forgiveness. Besides, I think there's a lot of sadness and pain underneath that anger. And if I wanted to grow, that's where I would focus as much as I didn't want to.
Yeah, I think you deserve sunshine and good things for you. So
And
Okay.
one more thing, the time and the energy that you put into all this resentment and anger, you could be doing things that you enjoy in your life. You could be creative. You could be hanging out with friends. You could be, even in your pain, you could be watching something great on Netflix. I've seen a few good shows I got to tell you about later, Tammy. I don't want to advertise anything, but I've
Okay.
seen some good things. But go enjoy your life. What a waste. Why waste another second on him? Why waste another moment of your life? He's not even in your life. So, those kinds of thoughts, I think, are helpful in beginning to move on.
And in my opinion, she's stuck with him now. You aren't. So, okay, that's me. Okay, next question. My SA partner started toward recovery 4 months ago. He is going to weekly therapy and SA meetings and has read a few books. He says he'll do anything I need if I just tell him what to do, but initially resists my request before eventually agreeing. Then he'll say it doesn't really matter what he thinks and he just needs to do it. But I think it does matter because it would demonstrate humility and sympathy. Is it fair to expect him to try to understand the reason for my needs, or am I expecting too much? Should he simply be should him simply complying be good enough at this early stage?
Well, again, I would recommend for him Out of the Doghouse, a relationship saving guide for men caught cheating, because it's all about how do I develop empathy for what my partner is going through. To your question, the first thing I look at, I bet it caught Tammy's eye, was 4 months ago, because this is very, very early. This is a process that he's going to be in for a long time. And we often have spouses on here who will come on and say, he's really, or she's really doing well in their recovery, but they're still a jerk, And I think our ability as addicts to be empathic, to demonstrate, as you say, humility, and I would think more empathy, that's a later stage in his development, emotionally. He has to stop hating himself. He has to stop feeling angry about having to stop. I mean, there's so much he has to do in the first year. So I don't think that you should have to beg or cajole or plead, but I do think it may take your saying, hey, here's the thought. I love the word that you said, my requests, because I really like that, because what I would be saying to him is, it would make me feel a lot more comfortable. It would make me grow a lot closer to you and trust you more if you were doing these things. I can't tell you do them or not, but I can tell you if you want to be closer to me and start to repair our history, it would help. And then you let it go. And then you get to see what kind of man you're involved with. Is he someone who listens and pays attention and realizes that the relationship is more important than his self-will? That's a good thing to learn. If he just continues doing what he's been doing until you nag him 50 times, that is not hopeful.
So so this is great. Somebody posted in the chat to us, Out of the Doghouse just came in the mail. So you got another 12 cents coming to you, but great. And there's a podcast on Out of the Doghouse as well, on sex, love and addiction podcast series. But I also posted, like somebody in early stages like that, the practical tools that will be gained in the level 1 sex and porn addiction 101. I highly recommend it. The guys that have gone through that, I had one therapist that reached out and said, that one of her clients was in level 2 now, but really had struggled with, kind of constant slips and relapses. And he had strung together at that point like 60 days, which was really meaningful for him. We hear those kind of stories regularly because it's practical foundational information. So
and I think, to Tammy's point, empathy and change don't come because you're stopped your sexual behavior. There are many other elements to growing empathy and humility, and and 12-step is part of that. Therapy is part of that. Time is part of that. And I said something I want to repeat again. It takes us a while to stop hating ourselves for what we've been doing and what we've done. We have a lot of shame. We have a lot of self feelings about ourselves. And oftentimes we don't see you at all because what we think is, I'm terrible, I'm awful, I can't believe I did this, and when you ask us to do something, by the way, that reminds us of how terrible and awful we are and all of that. Getting to empathy is more like him thinking, rather than I'm the cause of all this, and what did I do and I'm awful, I can't imagine what she's going through, or I can't imagine how hard this must be for her, or I can't imagine what it's like for her to have to ask me twice. But he's not there yet. And I would feel good about him being in the process and working on this. And I think 4 months of real trying is a good start. I would also suggest stopping some of the betrayed partners groups. They are free. We set up a whole website that is free for a reason. because that kind of help is not available to people who don't have the resources. So, stop in and hear what the other spouses have to say. I don't think you're alone in this at all. And I think hanging out with other men or women who are going through what you're going through will help clarify, because it's a great question, and it's a fairly basic question, and tells me you could use some more support.
Okay. How does one stop living in compartments? That is how I survived when I was a teenager and early 20s. I'm now 32 and single. I continue to struggle with sobriety. I've been in therapy and going to meetings, and living compartments has hindered by my recovery and sobriety. How do I move away from that? Part of my story involves being active in church, being in my addiction, coming clean, and getting excommunicated. So lots of trauma and shame.
Well, I have some thoughts, but I'd love to hear what you have to say, Tammy, and then I'll follow you.
Well, I worked really hard on being congruent, because I'm aware of those compartments. Like, I won't give examples, but like I was really aware, like I had a work Tammy and a personal Tammy. I had all these different versions of me, and I want to just be one person. And like I had to be aware when I was putting up a facade for one reason or another, or holding. I found myself holding back information often because, or shifting to the other person. I mean, it was a whole dance I was doing with, with that type of thing. But I was like, I want to be known. I want to be seen. I want people to, accept me or not. It's really up to them. It isn't a reflection on me. If somebody doesn't like me, they're entitled to not like me. That's okay. As long as I am, as long as I am being my true self. It took a lot of work. And I hear you're going to meetings and things. What I really hear though is so much of the struggle. So to me, it feels like, until like a higher level of help, you either more therapy,
Right. I thought of that too.
yeah. Because I feel like, those underlying issues, that's a huge trauma, being, very much, just for this example, in the church and then excommunicated. It's like you're in this community and now you're being shunned away. That's huge. If that's your identity and that's how you've been raised.
Community.
Yeah, it's your whole community. So that's my thoughts. So your thoughts?
Well, there's trauma there. Yes, absolutely. I also thought about going to treatment, Tammy, and the reason I thought like a treatment center, the reason I thought about that is I continue to struggle sobriety. I'm going to meetings. I've been in therapy. There's a certain point at which there's only so much you can do in an outpatient setting. As an outpatient therapist, I have so many options. I can have you come more often. I can send you to a doctor. I can send you to groups. But at a certain point, if you're really struggling, I need to say, this is more than I can handle and you need more help. So that is one of the reasons why residential care is available. I just want to say that, us or anybody else. I also want to say that, how do I say this? Not having compartments doesn't mean that everyone knows everything about me.
Right.
So, I
Good
don't
point.
think I've told Tammy much about my sex life, but we've been friends for many, many years. So she doesn't need to know every detail of my life, but somebody does. There has to be a place, especially in recovery, for me to say, this is where someone knows everything about me and I have no lies. You have to sort of start building that integrity, maybe one person at a time. This is why people get sponsors. This is why people have therapists, to have that one person. And I actually say it at Seeking Integrity. I'm like, guys, don't leave here with secrets. Please don't leave here with secrets, because this is a place to dump them. And so, I think, and by the way, more therapy, more meetings. I'll tell you what, if you're going to meetings 5 days a week online and you're going to therapy and you're going to agree, it's really much harder to slip. And as I want to repeat what Tammy said, you're not going to get what you want until you're sober. Because as long as you're creating new circumstances that you want to hide, how could you possibly not be compartmentalized? So 2 lessons from this. Number one, you don't need to tell everyone you need to go to everyone at church and all your friends and tell them all about your sex addiction. That's between you and the most personal people in your life. But you do have to be honest. You do have to make a commitment to healing, and you do have to find at least 1 or 2 people who hear the entire truth, because you need to know that you're worth loving and worth caring about if someone knows everything. or at least a few people do. So there are some clues about moving out of compartmentalization. And by the way, yes, all of us are compartmentalized. We have the part that's in our family. We have the part that our family knows nothing about. We have the part that, yeah, I mean, and it's not just what Tammy said about, I think all of us show different faces at work. I act differently at work, but the core of me, honesty, integrity, a willingness to be open and learn, that doesn't change no matter where I go or who I'm interacting with.
Yeah. And I use the word congruent. I had to be intentional about using congruent. I want to be congruent. I don't want to be pieces of me. I want to be the same person. And yes, different people see different levels, and that's, that is true, but it isn't this version or that version. It's one version, just different layers.
And Tammy, you know that one of the most important words to me in recovery is integrity. I had a program years ago called sexual integrity. Now we have a program called seeking integrity. I lug that word around with
I
me
do
because
too.
it's exactly what Tammy's talking about, which is to compartmentalize is to be disintegrated. And integrity comes from disintegration. To have integrity means to bring all those little parts together and be one person. And that's the goal of treatment. That's the goal of recovery. I mean, I think what you're talking about is a major goal for life. And
Yeah.
addiction keeps you compartmentalized. You cannot work on this fully until you've stopped.
And if you're compartmentalized, no one knows you, and you're never going to be
Ooh,
fully known by another person. So you're single, like it's one of those things. It will
right.
be very difficult for you to be in a relationship, A, if you're slipping, but B, if you can't be the true you, then how are they going to, how are they going to love you? How are you going to love them?
And I'll add to that. I have many guys I've worked with who are acting out and they go home. Maybe they acted out that afternoon or the night before, and they're doing their job at home on that particular day. They're playing with the kids or they're hanging out, decorate, whatever the heck they're doing. And their spouse comes home and says, "Oh, honey, I just love you so much. You're helping here or you're doing that." And what do you think the compartmentalized person says to themselves? Is, well, if you really knew where I was last night or what I was doing today, you wouldn't love me like that. So it's actually poisonous on some level because we can never receive fully the love that is coming at us that we actually deserve when we always have this question in our mind, which is, well, if they knew that, I don't think they'd love me, or would they really love me? So it's not just about other people. It's about your ability to feel and experience and value and trust that other people love you, which when you don't feel lovable is very hard to accomplish.
What a great way to end the evening. Thank you all for all
Oh,
your
it's
questions. We're
dinner
so sorry.
time.
I know, and I'm sorry. There's a bunch of questions and they're good ones. I'm sorry we won't get there, but come back, bring them back, type them in early. We'll get to them.
And if you're looking for a referral for therapists or information or groups or anything free, it doesn't matter. You can write a 4-letter word, Tammy, Tami, at seekingintegrity.com. And we really work hard to send you the right therapist or send you the right group or encourage you to read the right book or whatever it is, because, that's part of our healing. So
Yeah,
y'all
it
take
is.
care. Have a great
Bye.
evening. Bye for now.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Tammy.